Hey everybody, I'm Jay Scherr with Jay Scherr Business Consulting. We help entrepreneurs, business owners, and other leaders maximize their potential, build rock-solid foundations for their businesses, and create more freedom in their lives. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Warren Buffett said, "The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything." Well, on today's episode, we talk about the power of saying no, why we say yes when we want to say no, the art of empowered refusal, dealing with difficult askers, the nonverbals in communication, and more. My guest is a author, speaker, the Associate Dean for Research, the Bauer Professor of Marketing, and lead faculty of the Executive Women in Leadership program at the Bauer School of Business at the University of Houston. Her research has been published in top-tier academic journals in psychology, marketing, and management, and has been featured in major media outlets like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, NPR, Business Week, Fast Company, and Forbes. Please welcome the woman who's encouraging us to say that if it's not a resounding yes, then it's a hell no, Dr. Vanessa Patrick. Vanessa, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for the lovely introduction. I'm so delighted to be here.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure, and I am so excited about this conversation. This is one of those topics that we can all learn from, and I can tell you right off that it's one of those areas that I have a difficult time with myself. I've gotten better, but I still have a challenge with. So let's just say I'm a work in progress, like I'm sure many of us are. So I am really excited.
All of us are.
Yeah, for sure.
All of us are.
So I thought a good starting point for us, Vanessa, would be for you to share with all of us what your favorite thing is about yourself and why.
Well, I am someone who is a realistic optimist. I grab opportunities and I make things happen. I'm very much a builder of things, and I believe in potential. And so I'm always kind of grappling with new things and trying to build things and grow things. And so doing stuff. So no one would call me a lazy person because I'm just not. I'm always engaged in doing things, and I believe in the potential that people have, the potential of creativity and innovation, and that is something that drives me forward.
Ooh, I love that response. A realistic optimist. What a great phrase, or a great way to describe something about yourself. So give us an example, if you will, of where that has come into play in your life. And if we can maybe go back a bit in time, so it's not something more current, but something a bit further back.
You know, I was fortunate enough to start my career in an industry that really, really forced me to be creative and innovative with whatever I had to do. My first job was as an advertising executive. And in advertising, it's one of those industries where, as the advertising executive, you are the hub of a lot of activity about a brand, and you have to get everybody else to do things and make things happen. And in order to do that, you have to be really adaptive and flexible. And sometimes you just have to show up and do what somebody else's job is. And that kind of ability to say it will get done no matter what is something that a lot of people don't get training to do. And I feel that kind of ability to say, when I take it on, it will get done and it will get done well, is something that I got exposed to really early on, but it shows up in my day-to-day life, even today.
Ah, that's wonderful. So you mentioned as you were describing that favorite thing that you like about yourself, you said, I'm definitely not lazy. So, have you always been that way, where you've always been just a doer and a creator and never sitting down and just, watching the world go by?
So I think yes, that there's an insatiable curiosity that drives all of this. And so I'm someone who loves to read anything and learn everything. And so, I'll be moving from listening to a podcast on synthetic biology, and then moving to AI, to then moving to my area of research, which is aesthetics and design or self-regulation. And so for me, that cross-fertilization of ideas is really something that makes what I bring to the table really unique. It's I think one of the things I like about myself, to go back to that question, is the ability. I have a unique ability, which I think is pretty unique, to be able to bring both my left and right brain to the table when I'm dealing with an issue. So I have really invested a lot in making, being able to be creative and big thinking and divergent, but then also having the discipline to bring things down to the nuts and bolts to get very precise scientific research done. That's not very easy, but it's something that I think I have been able to do pretty well.
I love that, and I love being around people like you who are good with both left and right brain, and can take very complex information and distill it and be able to articulate it in a way that we can all understand. Because sometimes some of the information, obviously, that maybe you get involved in can be very heady, yet
Yes.
you have to be able to teach it in such a way that people grasp it and understand it. And I really respect that, because that's a talent and a gift that not everyone has. And I want to tap into that here in just a moment, but I still want to stay back in time. So you were born and raised in India, and what brought you to the U.S.? What was that? What was the catalyst for doing so? And then what was that transition like, coming to the United States?
That's a great question. Thank you, Jay. So I grew up in Bombay, India, and I pretty much did not get to travel too much. Like most people at the time, international travel was not a very common thing. My first taste of traveling outside of the country was when I was awarded a Rotary scholarship to travel for 3 months to Brazil. So my first trip leaving home was actually a 3-month excursion to visit 27 cities in Brazil, in Sao Paulo state and Mato Grosso do Sul, stay in people's houses. It was a fantastic exposure to what the world was like beyond what I knew. And that was when I got a taste of the world. Oh my God, just the amazing diversity and experiences that were out there that I could not access being at home. And so when I went back home from my Brazil trip, I was determined to find a way to leave and expose myself to this beautiful world. And I've always been academically inclined, and it just seemed like the right fit for me to pursue a PhD. And so when I went back, I did a lot of research about possible schools to apply to, the possible programs, and I was so fortunate to be admitted into the University of Southern California, into their marketing program.
Wonderful.
And of course, it was intimidating, as you might imagine, to leave home and to come and leave everything and leave and come to the US with 2 suitcases. And that was it, you know. And sometimes I look around my home and I'm just, you know, I need to pinch myself to think, I cannot believe that I have been here now for 20 plus years and have built a life for myself that I am so happy and proud of. But, you know, the initial years were hard. We didn't have, of course, the internet connections and the phone, the WhatsApps and stuff of the world at that time. And so it was not as easy as I would have liked it to be. But I had a wonderful group of faculty and friends at USC that made it all worthwhile. And I think I found my groove at USC. I think I really came to my own. And so for that, I am so grateful.
Yeah, what a fantastic story. So when you were on this Rotary trip to Brazil, you were awarded the Rotary Scholarship. And by the way, I'm a Rotarian as well.
Ah, good to know.
Yeah, so 3 months on this trip, what did you discover about yourself as you were on this trip?
So Jay, you know, this is a trip where you go from one place to another, and you are largely a guest at Rotarians' houses. So it's an immense hospitality on their part, but you have to be super, super adaptable and flexible, and you need to kind of go from a 6-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom house. You have to change what you're going to eat every day because it's unpredictable. I think the biggest thing that you realize is that life is sometimes best when you just go with the flow. And I was not always, you know, I'm a very organized person. So in order to get stuff done, I'm very organized, I'm streamlined, I have systems in place, but I also am big on flexibility. And so even though I'm organized and have systems, I'm also okay when systems just fly into the air. And I'm okay with dropping everything and doing something spontaneous. And I think that is something that I learned during this Brazil trip. You meet so many wonderful people, and you can't actually just have a plan that you are going to rigidly stick by. You have to do what is needed in the moment and make the most of it. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons I learned from that trip.
Yeah, what a powerful lesson that can serve you well throughout the rest of your life, for sure. So at any point when you first came to the U.S. and you're at the University of Southern California, was there ever a point where you questioned, did I make the right decision? And had you ever contemplated going back, or were you fully invested and just said, new life, this is what I'm doing, and we're going full systems ahead?
Yeah, you raise an important point that there is one moment, just one, where I questioned. And it's a sad moment. It was actually when I found out that my mom was diagnosed with 3rd-stage lung cancer, and she had just a very short time to live. And it's at that time where you feel this sense of helplessness. You are so far away from home. You're essentially relying on all the goodwill of all the friends and family in India. And you are sitting over here and cannot do a single thing to help. And that is the only time in the last 20 odd years that I have said, did I make the right decision? Because family is so important. And if you can't be there when you want to be there, just because it's just so far and so hard to navigate these complex things. So yes, that's the one time. I did, of course, go just before my mom passed. I did make make enough time to spend. The good part about being a professor is that when things like that happen, you can put your research aside and you can devote yourself to what is important. And that's something I value greatly about my job. But I also value the fact that after I came back, I did a series of research articles on cancer survival. And this is something that I love about my work, that I can be interested in a topic and divert my emotions and my emotional energy to research and illuminate these topics for others and contribute to the corpus of knowledge informed by my own experiences. So I very proud of my cancer survival papers, and they are both dedicated to my mom. So
wow, what an amazing way of continuing to express love for your mother through your research. What was one of the most valuable lessons? Obviously, many lessons, but as you think about your mom, what was one of the most valuable lessons that you took away from her?
My mom was a people person. You know, my grandmother lived 5 minutes away from our house, but it would take my mom about 1 hour to walk from our house to her house because she'd be stopping on the way and chatting with everybody. And I think, in fact, that's one of the topics of my one of the papers, which is the role of people, the social support that you can get in extending survivorship. Because she was given a few months to live, she actually lived for 4 years, which we are very grateful for. And my hypothesis was it was because of the social structure, because she was so socially embedded in her community, and that she was energized and she wanted to live, right? And so I worked on a paper that looked at social support and peer-to-peer interactions in cancer survivorship.
Gosh, that's incredible. Well, thank you for sharing that story. I appreciate that. So you're an award-winning professor and researcher. I'm curious, what is your philosophy around teaching?
I love to teach. I am passionate about sharing my knowledge. I think that passion and drive comes across in the classroom. My students pick up on my true desire to teach. Not because I'm paid to do it, not because I have to do it, but because I want to do it. And as I said, I love building things. So one of the things I build is a classroom experience that is memorable and impactful. So I just don't go to class and wing it. For me, my actions and my decisions in the classroom are very intentional, and they are all focused on student success. How do I make this the best experience for the students? And sometimes, Jay, I'm teaching the same class back to back 3 times, and I have to coach myself. How do you teach the same thing 3 times, one after the other? And I remind myself, and you'll probably find this interesting, I remind myself of that I am like a rock star. Let's say you are somebody who won an award for, like Elton John, who won all these awards for singing this one song when he was really young. But throughout his life, he has to sing that song as if it's the first time he is singing it, because the audiences are new.
Yeah.
And so I walk into the classroom reminding myself that I may know this material, I've taught this material many times, but the people in front of me, for them, it's the first time. And so I need to wear my Elton John hat and do what I need to do. And I think that enthusiasm and the passion for teaching and that kind of, it's like creating value through these interactions. that gets picked up by the students. And so I've won several teaching awards, which I'm very proud of at both the school as well as the university level, because I think that I have been able to do that. The other thing that I do is somewhat inventive, I think, because I curate material for my students and anyone who's interested on several topics. So my philosophy is, if you take my class, you have me forever. Meaning you have access to me forever. So I have groups on LinkedIn on the various topics that I teach, so that as I'm learning new material, I'm posting that material so that my students have curated material. I believe that the future of education is through curation. That you have to be able to make sense of all the information that's out there in the world and give it to students through a lens of curation. So if you're interested, let's say, one of my topics and areas of interest is inclusive design. If you are interested in inclusive design and you've taken my inclusive design classes, then you will know what's happening in inclusive design if you are part of my LinkedIn group. Because anything that's happening, that's cutting edge on the topic and written about, is on there. And so you don't have to go around searching for it, because I'm here to curate it for you. And I do it for inclusive design, I do it for general marketing, I do it for luxury strategy, and I do it for women in leadership, because those are the topics that I feel I'm really an expert on, and I am able to create these curations that benefit students and also other people who are interested in learning.
So that is brilliant. So this goes beyond the students that are in your classes. So on LinkedIn, as an example, LinkedIn groups, yes, this would be available to anyone who has an interest in those topics. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. I actually started a new one in January called The Joy of Lifelong Learning, and I've gotten a lot of followers there because, there are people who are like-minded in terms of their interest in just learning new things and interested in the curations associated with that.
Yeah, this is so good. So how has AI changed, or how has it supplemented, perhaps, I don't know if that's the right word to use, the way that you prepare, the way that you teach, the way that you engage? What impact has it had?
Not too much, actually. Not too much. Obviously, AI is included in the content of the classes where it is relevant, but at the moment, I see AI largely as a tool that students might choose to use, but it doesn't yet affect how I teach.
Very good. That's actually good to hear, but I like how you put the word "yet" in there, because you're leaving the door open for possibility. Staying flexible and adaptable.
Yes, and you should enter these new worlds with your eyes wide open. So I'm constantly reading. I know what the challenges are. I keep abreast of where I need to watch. I mean, there are lots of people who are talking about the fact that, universities are going to become extinct, and I think that there is a place for AI as we know it. And I think we, the people who are in the universities, need to be thinking about how to navigate that rather than just making extreme predictions about the demise of the institution.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, looking at ways to embrace it versus allowing
it's inevitable.
the fear.
Yes. And a lot of Yes, and there's a lot of fear associated with it, and a lot of doomsaying. But I think we need to look at what it can do and what we need to be careful about, and have our eyes open about all of those things.
Well, you said something a few minutes ago that I think is very relevant to this part of our conversation, and that is that you create an experience for your students, and that you invest time and resources and your mental bandwidth in being able to curate and create those experiences. Now, AI could curate or could aggregate information, but you create that experience that connects people, connects students with the material, right? So
Yes.
that is something that differentiates you from everyone else out there, and I could see where that would be so relevant and land so well for your students and for those that are also participating in these LinkedIn groups.
Yes, you raise a very important point, because I've thought about this a great deal. You have experience as a professor to look at people in the eye and know when something lands with them. You develop an intuition about what makes students tick, what makes a reader tick. So, take my book, for example. I didn't do the research and then jump straight into writing the book. I taught this material for 5 years before I decided to write. Because that's how I know what's going to land with people. That's how I know how to translate the research ideas into what is a viable, implementable practices that people will get. And so just that's just my approach. You can't just jump from, say, hey, I can just write a book based on what I know. No, you have to test drive these ideas. And you have to try different variations of things, and then write the book. And I think that path is what makes, when people say that I read the book and I can totally see this working for me, it's because I've taken the time to teach the material.
That makes perfect sense. And I don't want to, I'm not sure if this is the right way to say it, but your classroom almost became a lab, if you will, for your ideas, to teach, to get the feedback, to see what lands well, what doesn't, constantly refining and working on your own approach so it sticks. So I love that. So just so our audience is aware of this, the book that you're referencing is your new book, The Power of Saying No. And I'm curious, this is such an amazing book, and obviously we're going to link to this in the show notes. Where did the interest first begin for you? You tell really great stories, but I would love it if you would share with all of us where that first spark or interest in this topic came from, enough to where you said, I need to research this, and this is something I need to teach in my classes.
Yes. I think the story you're referring to is the one that I actually start the book with. And I start the book by telling a story about my 24th birthday, and the fact that I was in my first job and the junior most person on this advertising agency team, and we had a client meeting that afternoon, and as the junior most person on the team, one of my jobs was to write the minutes of the meeting, which essentially was summarizing what was said in the meeting and faxing it over the client. And this was routine procedure, and I did it for every single meeting. And so on that day, which was a Tuesday, by the way, on that day I performed this routine task. I typed out the minutes, showed them to my boss, and then I faxed the minutes off to the client. And then I was ready to head home. This was Bombay, and if you know Bombay, you can get stuck in terrible traffic. And so I was ready to dash off at 5 p.m. so that I wouldn't be late for my birthday party, which was that evening. We had some friends and family that were coming over. And what happened that day was that just as I was packing up and getting ready to leave, my boss came to my cubicle and she asked, "Did you fax the minutes?" And I said, "Yes." And so she said, "Okay." And she turned towards the elevator. And then she turned back. And I thought she was going to say to me, "I hope you have a great party. Enjoy your evening with your friends," which would be a natural thing to say. But instead she said, "Did the client fax back saying that they have received the minutes?" This was another routine procedure. We would fax to the client, they would fax back saying received, just to make sure we were on the same page. And I said, "No, we did not receive the fax." And she said, "Well, don't leave till you do." And I was completely shell-shocked and lost for words, Jay. I had no words. I had no idea how to push back. I had no idea how to reason. And I think, reflecting on it, it's a pretty unreasonable thing to ask someone on their birthday to stay back and wait for a fax. But this is what she did, and that is how I spent my evening. The office started emptying, and I was still staring at the fax machine, hoping and praying that the fax would come. I was calling home on a regular basis, only to find out that, people were arriving, dinner was being served, and I was in the office waiting for a fax. Now, even though it sounds pretty sad and pathetic today, I have recovered, let me assure you. But it did sow the seed for this curiosity about why people behave like they do, and why did I not feel empowered enough to push back? Why don't I have enough agency to speak for myself for something that is important to me? Why was I so compelled to do what someone in power told me to do? And these kind of questions really shaped a lot of my thinking moving forward. And so when it came to researching different things, the issue of why we say yes when we want to say no was one of those things that I was really curious about and invested a fair amount of time studying.
Well, you now obviously have the benefit of time and perspective, and it's a shame that you had that experience. Yet now that you can look back, obviously it was that experience that planted the seed that germinated into the research and that ultimately led to the book that you have brought to life. And for all of us that are watching and listening right now, I am sure that you can relate. Your story may be different, but you can relate to the exact same scenario in why did I not know how to say no? Why didn't I feel comfortable saying no? Why didn't I have the words to be able to push back? And why am I still saying yes to the things that I should be saying no to? I mean, those are the kinds of questions that I'm asking myself when I fall into that exact same scenario. Again, context might be different, but the result is the same. So let's explore that a little bit. Why do we, based on the research that you've done, why do we say yes so often when we know we should be saying no to something?
Yes, this is really a very human predicament when we say yes when we want to say no. And it stems from being human. And so the three reasons that I've identified in my research are the following. One is we are concerned about our relationships with others. We are social creatures. We want to have positive relationships with other people. We want to have friends. We want people to like us. We want to feel included. And we fear that saying no is going to damage our relationship with the asker. The other reason is our concern for reputation. We want to be seen in a positive light by others. We want people to see us as competent and capable and able to do whatever, whenever we are asked. But that's not realistic. And yet we say yes to things that we shouldn't do because we are really anxious and deeply conflicted about the fact that our reputations will be damaged if we say yes, if we say no, to the asker. The third reason that we struggle is we just simply don't have the practice. We have never learned. We have been socialized to say yes to opportunities, to people, to things, to favors, but never really learned how to say an effective no. In fact, there's research that shows that people will avoid at all costs the person if they have to say no to that person. So avoidance, like just stay far away. If you know someone's going to ask you something, then the best tactic in the moment is to just run in the opposite direction. But that is not a feasible tactic. Learning the skill and practicing the skill, this is where the book comes in. It's really about embracing the mindset that no is not a bad thing. No is about you and not about rejecting other people. And recognizing that everything is a trade-off. When we say yes to something, we are saying no to something else. And so we must learn to say yes to the things that matter and no to the things that don't.
Wow, that is so very true. And that no itself is a complete sentence. So I can tell you that all three of these reasons, I've done all three of them, right? I've avoided, I've been concerned about relationships and, of course, my reputation, right? I want to be the person who will always say yes and do the thing and, be that good guy, right? And
Yes.
It's amazing when I step back from a situation, and now I have a few tools in my tool belt, thanks to you, where I now know how to be able to say no more effectively. But I think that the importance of being able to establish those boundaries so you can be very clear on the things that are important to you, the things that matter, the things that give you energy, the things that are going to move the needle for you, the things that align with your values, that you're saying yes to those things and saying no to the rest of it. And so if you were to share with our audience a tool that they could use when they're confronted with someone who is asking them to do something that they really don't want to do or don't have the time to do, that they're overextended, what would be a good approach that they could use?
So in the book, I talk about the competencies we have to develop to be able to communicate an empowered refusal. An empowered refusal is essentially a way of saying no that stems from your identity and gives voice to your values, your priorities, and your preferences and your beliefs. So there are a set of competencies, and I describe them by using the acronym ART, A-R-T, the art of empowered refusal. And these three competencies are developing a sense of awareness about, as you put a little bit earlier, what you bring to the table, what your values are, what do you care about. So developing a really strong sense of self and awareness about what your priorities are, what you care about, how you want to operate and show up in this world, what you bring uniquely to the table. Once you have a good handle on that, then it becomes much clearer to figure out what you should do and what you shouldn't do. right? What are good for you activities and what are not so good for you activities. And once you've developed this deepened sense of self-awareness, then you can develop systems. I call these systems personal policies. Personal policies are simple rules that we set up for ourselves that shape and guide our actions and decisions. So once we've set ourselves up to be able to say no, it's much more easy to say no. But there are some really practical strategies that we might use. So, for example, I often tell people, just on a practical level, when you get a request that you need to think about or you are unsure about, always buy time. Never give a response in the moment. We are significantly more likely to say yes to a face-to-face request and respond immediately in the moment with a yes, as opposed to a no, because that's the socially desirable response. So instead of falling into that trap, we need to recognize that buying time gives us the opportunity to actually weigh the pros and cons, to reflect on whether this is a good thing for you or not. Very often, we are approached to do things and take on more stuff because we are extremely competent and responsible and are the ones who will get it done. So the people who get things done get asked to do more things. And so if you are one of those kind of people, then it's a good one of the things to ask yourself when a request comes in is not, can I do this? Because if you're capable and responsible and smart and innovative, you can do a lot of things. And so your answer sets you up to say yes. You need to be distilling your decision through a different lens. You need to be asking yourself, must I do this? Must I do this? Forces you to consider your values, forces you to consider the trade-offs you have to make, forces you to consider what you'd have to give up if you did this. And so when you ask yourself, must I do this? The answer very often will be, no, not really. You must do very few things in life. And so there are these simple strategies that I've sprinkled throughout the book, and all of these are based on research. And this is what I think is really, really important, that, these are not things that I've just come up with, but they are insights that are grounded in established, peer-reviewed research.
Yeah, this is so amazing. And the book is filled with great tools. There's great stories in there. You obviously share the research involved as well. So based on what you know today, if we were to go back to your 24th birthday, that exact situation, you're standing there, boss is about to get in the elevator, turns around, says what the boss says. With the tools that you have today, how do you respond?
That's a great question. I think that I would have to, and I hope that I could get a more reasonable outcome from my boss. I would have talked to her, or I would have not been shell-shocked. I would have had some responses ready. One of the things is to be ready and have a way of dealing with tough situations by having these kind of go-to mechanisms. So one is offer alternatives. So I could have said, hey, do you remember that I have this birthday party that I need to attend? Do you mind if I come early tomorrow morning and make sure that the fax is on your desk before you get here? I could have offered another alternative. I said, hey, I've got friends who are going to be working late anyway. Do you mind if I ask them to pick the fax up and put it on your desk? I could have come up with alternatives. And since this was such a trivial task, as long as it got done, who did it and how it got done was less important. And so I would have negotiated a better outcome for myself had I had the agency and the empowerment to do so.
Very good. And I think just to add to that, and you certainly talk about this as well, it is very challenging for us to be able to think of something on the spot when we are in that situation where someone's asking something of us. So I love the idea of being prepared in advance.
Yes.
So already know the things that are important to you, right? Knowing how you respond when someone asks you to do something that falls outside of the area that you would normally say yes to. And practicing that, right? Being able to have that roll off when you're confronted with those situations. I think that's incredibly important. So you also talk about this in the book. When you are confronted with someone who is a difficult asker, right? Where they don't, you give your response of no, but they continue to push, right? They're looking for that way to get you to say yes. So, and you provide tools in the book, but when we're confronted with someone like that, what can we do to move through that and be able to create that space that we need to be able to reflect and come back and then ultimately say no if it doesn't align with what we want to do?
Jay, when I teach this, when I used to teach this stuff on empowered refusal, I very often stopped at the point of giving people the competencies. And then it would come up very frequently that, there are people that we know who will not take no for an answer. They are the pushy askers. You can say no, you can say an empowered no, and they will still go on pushing for what they want. And if you don't, then they give you things like the silent treatment, they ignore you. And so there are some social consequences of dealing with people who are more difficult askers and people who are used to getting their way and get very cranky if they don't get their way. And so unfortunately, we do have to deal with these people. And so I developed a concept, which I teach in my classes, called dealing with the walnut tree. And I call these difficult askers walnut trees. And this metaphor resonates with people. As the Black American walnut tree is this a tree with a luxuriant canopy, and it dominates the landscape, and it has a root system that goes out about 50 feet around the tree. But what that root system does is it exudes into the soil a chemical called juglone, which is a herbicide. And so while the walnut tree is flourishing and thriving in this environment, what it's doing is it's stunting the growth of any other tree around it. And so as soon as I tell the walnut tree story, people were like, I know walnut trees who are people. I know people who act like walnut trees. And as soon as you start thinking about it and thinking, how do I deal with a walnut tree it's all about them. It's all about what they want. It's all about dominating the situation and thriving no matter what the cost to other people. Then you start being able to think about strategies to deal with walnut trees. And there are strategies. The same way that we have to learn to say no more effectively, there are strategies to deal with walnut trees. The first one is recognizing a walnut tree and how they act. Like spotting the walnut tree. So walnut trees are used to getting their way, and they are master persuaders. So what they often do is that they will always make their requests face-to-face, because they know that face-to-face requests get more compliance. Walnut trees are often going to insist on an immediate response. So every time you try to buy time, they're going to be like, no, tell me now, tell me now. And the third thing walnut trees do is that they are very good at creating a differential advantage for themselves, like a home court advantage. Like they would, for instance, call you to their office or invite you for a meal that they are paying for. So they put you in this situation where it's very difficult for you to say no. Now, recognizing that this is the operating style of a walnut tree is the first step. Because once you recognize the pattern of behavior, then it becomes really easy to say, that's a walnut tree, I know how to deal with them. Right? And then there are obviously strategies associated with dealing with walnut trees, which include sometimes just repeating yourself again and again. If they don't hear you the first time, then say it again and again and again. There are ways in which you can just change the conversation. And if people are not dealing with you face to face, then convert the conversation to a digitally mediated conversation. Respond via text or email, because it's much easier for us to deal with people that are difficult via text and email. You could delegate that response to someone else. They're not listening to you, maybe they'll listen to somebody else. So there are a whole bunch of strategies that are very practical that I've arrived at in the book that helps you deal with a walnut tree. So the key takeaway is that once you spot a walnut tree, you have to feel confident that you have the skills and the tools that you need to say no to that walnut tree, even though they are really going to be pushy.
Absolutely.
And want their way.
And I love how you've drawn on the wisdom of nature in this book, and how you use marigolds as well as walnut trees, etc. So great tools are in this book, and the key to all of this is to learn, to read, to learn, and apply. To apply the lessons that you learn. So for all of you that are watching and listening right now, you've already heard some great tools, but this just scratches the surface. There's so much to this book, but for it to be effective for you, it is something that you have to practice. It is something that you have to put into practice and start to use to become proficient at it. So we'll put a link in the show notes where you can purchase a copy of The Power of Saying No. So Vanessa, as we are wrapping up our conversation today, I literally could talk to you for another hour or two. So I'm curious, what are 1 to 2 bigger questions that you're asking yourself today? Bigger questions that you're contemplating?
Interesting. I am really, really interested in 2 main things. One, and this is kind of shaping how I'm thinking about my research moving forward. I'm really, really interested in what makes people genuinely interested in learning for a lifetime. So I'm really curious about the ingredients of lifetime learning, lifelong learning, excuse me. So that's definitely one, because I've met people recently who have accomplished great things in their careers, but there's that drive to learn, to do more, and then others who are just not. And I'm just really curious about what makes those people different from other people.
Wow.
The other thing that I'm really, really fascinated with, and I'm so curious about, and this goes back to my science background. So curiously enough, I have a bachelor's degree in microbiology and biochemistry with a specialization in genetic engineering. And I am just fascinated by synthetic biology right now. I am just so curious about our ability to engineer cells to do things that we wanted to do, and the consequences of not knowing what would happen if we don't have a stop button for some of these genetically engineered materials. Like, how do we stop a cell from doing what we don't want it to do? It's not like a computer you can switch off, because once you put material into a living being, it becomes that living being's material. You can't control it. And so I'm really, really, really curious about synthetic biology and the future of it for us on this planet.
Wow, two fascinating big questions to be contemplating. So I would share with you that in terms of the ingredients of a lifelong learner, I would love to have further conversation with you about that from a research perspective, and just carry that conversation forward. So I'm making a note to myself to follow up with you on that one. So here is my final question to you, and we have all of your social media platforms, obviously the link to your website where you can purchase this incredible book. So my final question to you is, what is one of the most difficult decisions that you've had to make in the pursuit of the person you are today? One of the most difficult decisions you've had to make.
Going against the grain. So I'm an associate dean, and I love doing that associate dean job because it's got to do with research, and it's aligned with my passion for research and scholarship. But most people assume that if you're an associate dean, your aspirations are to be dean. And one of the biggest decisions that I've had to make that's very difficult, because it's pretty tempting to take on, a new challenge, is to kind of really focus on what makes me tick and what I love, and to recognize that sometimes good opportunities that look good are not good for you. And so as I stand today in 2023, I don't believe that I want to go the academic administration route of dean and provost, because while that's perfectly viable route for a lot of people, it doesn't align with who I am. And it's a very hard decision because it's almost like everyone expects that of you. It's much more lucrative than and I have to kind of really be true to myself and recognize what my strengths are and what I care about, and not fall into the trap of other people's expectations.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I can see where using all of the different tools and the research that you have done on the topic that we're talking about today comes into play in a decision like that, right? Really stepping back, thinking through this. And if the decision is no, being able to say no in the way that is empowering for you. So I love that. Thank you for that. And Vanessa, I want to thank you so very much for joining us today on Business Minds Coffee Chat. I truly do appreciate the conversation. I appreciate you just being candid and sharing of your insights and your knowledge, and bringing your powerful book, The Power of Saying No, to life. I truly am grateful, which the reason I wore this shirt is because I'm grateful that you said yes instead of saying no. And I appreciate you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. This was a great conversation.
It is absolutely my pleasure. And for all of you, thank you so very much for watching and for listening and for investing time with us today. And I do have a quick favor. If you would please leave us a comment, rate this podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That goes a long way in expanding our reach and being able to attract just incredible guests, just like Dr. Vanessa Patrick. And to listen to more podcasts, all you need to do is visit jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button, and until next time, keep learning, keep growing. Make sure you pick up a copy of The Power of Saying No and apply the lessons you learn. And until next time, we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.